There are moments in life when you meet someone and something inside you becomes quiet. You don't need to explain it. You don't need to force it. You simply feel that being near them makes the world a little less heavy. Maybe your heart has been searching for a place where it doesn't have to pretend, a place where you can be yourself, where your silence is understood, where your scars don't make you less worthy of love. And maybe that's why you're here. Not because I can promise you a perfect life. I can't. None of us can. But I can promise something more honest, a connection where we don't run from the difficult days, where we choose each other even when life isn't easy. So if you've ever wondered why your heart keeps coming back to the same place, maybe the answer isn't complicated. Maybe it's because some hearts don't need a reason to recognize where they belong. Sometimes your heart knows something before your mind is ready to understand it. It happens quietly. There isn't always a dramatic moment, no perfect sentence, no music playing in the background, no sign from the sky telling you that you've finally found the place where you can breathe. Sometimes it is simply the feeling you get when you're around someone, and, for a moment, you don't feel like you have to be anyone else. You don't have to perform. You don't have to prove your worth. You don't have to explain every scar, every mistake, every chapter of your life that you're not proud of. You can just sit there, breathe, and exist. And somehow that feels like enough. Maybe that's what your heart has been searching for all this time. Not perfection, not a perfect person, not a perfect relationship where nothing ever goes wrong. Maybe your heart has been searching for somewhere it can finally stop running. Because life teaches us to run. We run from disappointment. We run from rejection. We run from memories that hurt too much to revisit. We run from people who made us feel like we weren't enough. Sometimes we even run from the people who genuinely care about us, because caring can be frightening when you've been hurt before. You start building walls. At first, those walls feel like protection. You tell yourself that you're being careful. You tell yourself that you don't need anyone. You convince yourself that depending on someone is weakness. You learn how to smile while you're hurting. You learn how to say, I'm fine, when you're anything but fine. You learn how to walk away before anyone gets close enough to see what you're really carrying. And after a while, you become very good at being alone. But being good at being alone isn't always the same thing as being happy alone. There is a difference between peace and isolation. There is a difference between independence and emotional distance. There is a difference between protecting your heart and never allowing anyone to touch it. Maybe you've spent years protecting yours. Maybe you've been waiting for someone who doesn't demand that you lower your walls overnight, someone who understands that trust isn't built through promises, it's built through time, through consistency, through small moments when someone could have walked away but chose to stay. That's where real connection begins, not with grand declarations, with presence, with someone sitting beside you when you don't know what to say. Someone who doesn't try to fix every part of you because they understand that you're not a broken thing that needs repairing. You're a human being who has lived through things, learned things, lost things, and still somehow found the strength to keep moving. And maybe that's beautiful. Maybe the parts of you that you once considered weaknesses are actually evidence of how far you've come, the nights you survived, the goodbyes you endured, the people you had to release, the dreams that didn't work out, the moments when you thought you couldn't take another step, and somehow the next morning came, and you got up anyway. You may not have realized it at the time, but every one of those moments shaped you. And then one day, someone enters your life who doesn't look at your past and judge you for it. They look at you and see the person standing here now. That's rare, and when something rare happens, the heart notices. It may not know how to explain it, but it notices. You can feel it in the quiet moments, in the conversations that don't need to be forced, in the comfortable silence, in the way you can laugh about something completely ordinary and somehow remember that life can still be beautiful. It's not always about excitement. Sometimes love feels like calm. Sometimes it feels like coming home after a long day and knowing you don't have to explain why you're tired. Sometimes it is simply knowing that there is someone in this world who wants to understand you rather than judge you. And perhaps that's why your heart keeps pulling you towards certain people. Because your heart is not always looking for someone who can give you everything. Sometimes it is looking for someone who can make you feel safe enough to be honest. Someone who can hear the things you don't say. Someone who notices when your smile is different. Someone who understands that silence doesn't always mean distance. Sometimes silence means trust. There are people you meet and immediately feel the need to impress them. And then there are people you meet and somehow feel like you can finally put the mask down. That's the difference. When you're trying to impress someone, you're presenting a version of yourself. When you feel safe with someone, you're revealing yourself. And being seen for who you really are can be one of the most frightening and beautiful experiences in life. Because once someone sees you, truly sees you, there is nowhere left to hide. They see your confidence and your insecurity. They see your strength and your fear. They see your kindness and your impatience. They see the dreams you talk about and the dreams you're afraid to admit you still have. They see the person you want the world to believe you are, and they also see the person you become when nobody is watching. And if they stay, that means something. Not because staying makes them perfect, but because they have seen enough of the real you to make a choice. And perhaps that's what belonging really means. It doesn't mean someone thinks you're flawless. It means they know you're not, and they still want to walk beside you. I think sometimes we misunderstand what love is supposed to feel like. We imagine fireworks. We imagine constant excitement. We imagine never disagreeing, never getting tired, never needing space, never having difficult conversations. But real life isn't like that. People get tired. People become afraid. People misunderstand each other. People have bad days. Sometimes you say something you wish you could take back. Sometimes the person you love says something that hurts you. Sometimes circumstances put pressure on something that felt easy before. And that's where you learn whether the connection was only based on emotion or whether something deeper exists. Because love isn't proven when everything is easy. It's revealed when things become difficult. It's revealed in patience, in forgiveness, in communication, in the willingness to say, I don't understand you right now, but I want to. That's powerful. Because the easiest thing in the world is to walk away when something becomes complicated. The harder thing is to slow down, to listen, to admit when you're wrong, to say, I'm hurt, instead of pretending you aren't, to say, I need you. When every instinct tells you that needing someone makes you vulnerable, maybe vulnerability is not weakness, maybe it is courage. It takes courage to love after you've been hurt. It takes courage to trust after someone has betrayed you. It takes courage to open the door again after you've spent years locking it. And if you've done that, even once, you should understand something about yourself. You're stronger than you think, because your heart didn't become hard. It survived. There's a difference. A hard heart says, I will never feel again. A surviving heart says, I was hurt, but I still believe there might be something worth feeling. That belief matters. Maybe you're here because some part of you still believes in that. Maybe beneath all the disappointment, there is still a small voice inside you saying that love doesn't have to be painful all the time, that someone can choose you without trying to control you, that someone can love you without asking you to become somebody else, that someone can hold your hand without holding you back, that someone can stand beside you without standing over you. And maybe that is the kind of connection your heart recognizes. Not possession, not control, not dependency, partnership. Two people who are already whole, choosing to share the road. Two people who don't need to complete each other because they understand that nobody is incomplete. They simply make each other's lives richer. They bring warmth to difficult days. They bring laughter into ordinary moments. They remind each other that life is more than surviving the next problem. Sometimes life is sitting together while the rain falls outside. Sometimes it's sharing a meal. Sometimes it's talking until 2 in the morning about things that probably won't matter tomorrow. Sometimes it's laughing so hard that you forget what you were worried about. Sometimes it's doing absolutely nothing and realizing that nothing feels better when you're with the right person. Those moments may look small from the outside, but life is mostly made of small moments. Years from now, you may not remember every conversation. You may not remember every place you visited. You may not remember what you wore on an ordinary Tuesday. But you might remember how someone made you feel when you were struggling. You might remember the person who stayed on the phone when you couldn't sleep. You might remember the person who looked at you after your worst day and somehow made you believe tomorrow could be better. You might remember the person who didn't ask you to hide your sadness. That's what stays. Not perfection, presence. And maybe when your heart says this feels different, you should listen. Not blindly, not without thinking, but honestly. Listen to the part of yourself that feels peaceful around someone, because your heart has a language of its own. It speaks through comfort, through trust, through that strange feeling of familiarity you can't quite explain. Sometimes you meet someone and it feels like you've known them longer than you actually have. Not because you know every detail of their life, but because something about their presence doesn't feel foreign. It feels natural. You don't have to force the conversation. You don't have to calculate every word. You don't have to wonder whether you are being judged for being yourself. You can just be. And maybe that's what belonging really means. It doesn't mean losing yourself inside another person. It means finding a place where you don't have to lose yourself to be loved. That's important. Because the right connection should not make you smaller. It should not make you afraid to speak. It should not make you question your worth every day. It should not require you to abandon your dreams. The right kind of love gives you room to grow. It says, become more of yourself. It doesn't say, become who I want you to be. There is a quiet freedom in that. To know that someone can love you and still want you to become stronger. To know that you can love someone without owning them. To know that two people can stand beside each other while still having their own dreams, their own thoughts, their own histories. That's maturity. And maybe that's what your heart has been waiting for. Not someone who will promise that nothing will ever hurt, but someone who will say, if it hurts, we will talk about it. Not someone who promises never to leave, but someone who chooses to stay through the ordinary days, not just the beautiful ones. Not someone who tells you that life will always be easy, but someone who makes you feel like the difficult days don't have to be faced alone. That's different. And maybe after everything you've been through, different is exactly what you need. You don't need another story that begins with excitement and ends with silence. You don't need another relationship built on fear of losing each other. You don't need to chase someone who is constantly walking away. You don't need to convince anyone that you're worthy of being loved. You are already worthy. The question isn't whether you're worthy. The question is whether the person beside you knows how to value what they have. And if someone does, you can feel it. You feel it in the way they speak to you, in the way they listen, in the way they remember small details, in the way they respect your boundaries, in the way they don't disappear when life becomes inconvenient. Love isn't only what someone says when they're looking into your eyes. It's what they do when you're not there. It's how they speak about you when you can't hear them. It's how they treat your trust. It's whether their actions quietly support their words. Because words can be beautiful, but consistency is where truth lives. And maybe your heart knows that. Maybe that's why you're tired of promises. Maybe you've heard enough beautiful words. Maybe now you want something simple, something real. Someone who doesn't need to convince you every day because their actions already speak. Someone who can sit beside you without needing to fill every silence. Someone who can look at your imperfections and not turn them into weapons. Someone who knows that love isn't a competition. There is no score, no winner, no loser. There are simply two people trying to understand each other while walking through a world that is already difficult enough. And if you find that person, don't take the ordinary moments for granted, because one day you'll realize those ordinary moments were the extraordinary part. The quiet mornings, the unexpected laughter, the long conversations, the peaceful silence, the hand reaching for yours without thinking, the simple question, did you get home safely? The message that says, I'm here. Small things, but sometimes small things carry the most weight. Maybe your heart doesn't belong somewhere because that place is perfect. Maybe it belongs there because, for the first time, it feels safe enough to rest. And if your heart has been tired, if it has carried too much for too long, perhaps you don't need another reason to keep running. Perhaps you need permission to stop, to breathe, to look at the person beside you, to ask yourself whether this connection brings you peace or takes it away, whether you can be honest, whether you can grow, whether you can laugh, whether you can be vulnerable, whether you can disagree without becoming enemies, whether you can be yourself without fearing that being yourself will make you unlovable. Because the place where your heart belongs should never require you to disappear. It should give you the courage to become more fully yourself. And maybe that's the real meaning behind feeling that your heart belongs somewhere. It's not about being rescued. It's not about finding someone to complete you. It's not about escaping your life. It's about finding someone who makes you want to live it more honestly. someone who reminds you that there is still beauty in ordinary days, someone who makes you want to become kinder, more patient, more present, more grateful. And perhaps, when you find that kind of connection, you don't need to rush it, let it breathe, let trust take time, let people reveal themselves through actions. Let the relationship become something real instead of something you have to constantly define, because the deepest connections aren't always the loudest. Sometimes they're quiet, sometimes they're almost invisible from the outside, but inside them, there is a sense of peace that is difficult to fake. And when you feel that peace, don't confuse it with boredom. The world teaches us to chase intensity, but intensity isn't always love. Sometimes intensity is uncertainty. Sometimes the butterflies aren't romance. Sometimes they're anxiety. Sometimes the person who keeps you guessing isn't mysterious. They're simply inconsistent. And sometimes the person who makes you feel calm isn't lacking passion. They're giving you something far more valuable: security, a place where your heart doesn't have to constantly ask, "Are you still here?" because it already knows. That kind of love doesn't need to be loud, it doesn't need an audience, it doesn't need to prove itself to strangers. It simply exists between two people who understand what they have. And maybe that's why your heart keeps returning here. Not because anyone forced it, not because someone convinced it, but because somewhere beneath all the noise, all the fear, all the memories, all the doubts, there is a quiet part of you that recognizes peace. When it finds it, real love feels like peace, not pressure. It doesn't make you constantly wonder where you stand. It doesn't make you feel like you have to earn someone's attention, compete for their affection, or become someone you're not just to keep them close. Real love doesn't need fear to hold two people together. It gives you room to breathe. There is something beautiful about being with someone who doesn't make you question your value every time they become quiet. Someone whose presence doesn't feel like a test you might fail. Someone who doesn't make you chase reassurance every day, because their actions already give you enough reason to feel secure. Maybe you've experienced the opposite. Maybe you've known what it's like to care deeply while constantly wondering if the other person cares the same way. To read between every line, to analyze every message, to wonder why their energy changed, to feel close one day and completely distant the next. That kind of uncertainty can slowly exhaust a heart. And sometimes we mistake that exhaustion for passion. We think, if I feel this strongly, it must mean this person is important. But strong feelings don't always mean healthy feelings. Sometimes the strongest thing you can feel is anxiety. Sometimes you aren't afraid of losing the person because you love them so deeply. You're afraid because you never felt like you truly had them. That's not peace. And love shouldn't require you to live in constant fear. Real love can be quiet. It can be sitting across from someone without needing to impress them. It can be knowing that disagreement doesn't automatically mean abandonment. It can be saying, "I need some time," and trusting that the other person won't use your vulnerability against you. It can be knowing that you can have a difficult conversation without everything falling apart. That's what emotional safety feels like. You don't have to be perfect. You don't have to have the right words every time. You don't have to hide your difficult days. You can say, "Today I'm struggling." And instead of being judged, you're met with understanding, not pity, not control. Understanding there is a difference between someone wanting to save you and someone simply wanting to stand beside you. You don't need someone to rescue you from your life. You need someone who respects the life you're already building and wants to walk alongside you. That's a much deeper kind of connection, because love isn't about becoming dependent on another person for your happiness. It's about sharing happiness without making someone responsible for it. You can be strong alone and still want companionship. You can be independent and still want someone's hand in yours. You can know how to survive by yourself and still choose not to walk every road alone. There is no weakness in that. Maybe your heart belongs where you can be both strong and vulnerable, where you don't have to choose between independence and intimacy, where you can say, "I can handle this," and also say, "I'd like you beside me." That's real partnership, and maybe that's why peace matters so much, because after enough chaos, peace becomes something you recognize immediately. You stop being impressed by dramatic promises. You stop chasing people who disappear. You stop confusing jealousy with love. You stop believing that suffering is proof of commitment. You start noticing the small things: respect, consistency, patience, kindness, a person who listens. a person who remembers, a person who doesn't make you feel guilty for having feelings, a person who can